The ancient spires of the Galactic Council gleamed under the triple suns of Harmony Station, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the worried faces of delegates from 100 different worlds. For 3,000 years, these halls had witnessed nothing but peaceful negotiations and diplomatic solutions. Today, panic filled the air like a toxic cloud. Ambassador Lyra of the Aquarii pressed her translucent hands against the speaking podium, her crystalline body flickering with distress. Signals. Honored delegates, we have exhausted all traditional methods. The Nethans refuse to acknowledge our ancestral claims to the Spiral Nebula mining rights. They have begun extracting resources from our sacred crystals. Across the chamber, the Nethan representative floated in his containment field, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. The Aquarii speak of sacred crystals, but their ancestors abandoned those rocks 5 centuries ago. We have invested generations in developing those mining operations. We will not surrender our livelihood to their sudden religious awakening. The Council's chief mediator, a being so old that younger species had forgotten his original name, raised a trembling appendage for silence. Both claims have merit under galactic law. However, the situation has escalated beyond our capabilities. 3 Aquarii mining vessels were destroyed last cycle. 7 Nethan extraction platforms have been sabotaged. This is the first act of violence in our sector for over 200 years. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The peaceful accords that governed galactic civilization had never been tested by actual warfare. Their enforcement mechanisms relied on voluntary compliance and gentle persuasion. We need external intervention, the chief mediator continued. Our traditional peacekeeping forces are trained for mediation, not conflict resolution. We must seek help from the Outer Rim territories. The Council's emergency beacon carried a simple message across the void. Peaceful species required for conflict mediation. Minimal force authorized. Diplomatic experience preferred. Standard peacekeeping protocols apply. The transmission reached dozens of civilizations, most of whom politely declined involvement in what they considered a minor trade dispute. The message bounced through relay stations, traveling farther into unexplored space than any Council communication had ever ventured. Deep in the Terran Federation's frontier territory, Commander Riley was reviewing supply reports when his communications officer interrupted. Sir, we're receiving a distress signal from an unknown source. They're requesting peacekeeping assistance. Riley looked up from his datapad, his weathered face showing the first interest he'd felt in months. His crew had been patrolling the same empty space lanes for 6 months without encountering anything more exciting than smugglers and pirates. What kind of peacekeeping? They mentioned conflict mediation between 2 species fighting over mining. Rights, standard protocols, minimal force, diplomatic resolution preferred. Riley's expression darkened. The Terran Federation had learned long ago that conflicts left unresolved only grew worse with time. How far out are they? 14 days at maximum burn, sir. The signal is coming from a heavily populated sector. Multiple civilizations, established trade routes, the works. Riley made his decision with the speed that had kept him alive through 3 border wars. Set course for the source coordinates. Signal the crew to prepare for deployment, and tell the Marines to clean their weapons. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Hayes, looked puzzled. Sir, the message specifically mentioned minimal force and diplomatic solutions. Riley's smile was the kind that had made enemy commanders surrender without firing a shot. Hayes, when has humanity ever solved a problem with minimal force? We're going to give these aliens exactly what they need. They want peacekeepers? They'll get peacekeepers. The Defiance engines roared to life, pushing the heavily armed vessel toward its first contact with galactic civilization in the ships. Armory, weapons that had been designed to fight other humans, hummed with deadly potential. The crew prepared for what they assumed would be a straightforward military intervention. Back on Harmony Station, the Council waited anxiously for responses to their distress call. They had no idea that their plea for gentle mediation was about to be answered by a species that had never met a conflict. They couldn't solve with superior firepower. The Aquarii and Nethans continued their polite warfare. carefully avoiding civilian casualties while slowly escalating toward something neither side truly wanted. Their measured aggression was about to encounter humanity's definition of conflict resolution. Riley studied the star charts, noting the strategic positions of both fleets. His tactical mind automatically identified firing solutions, escape routes, and force multiplication opportunities. To him, the situation was simple. Two sides were fighting over resources, and someone needed to make them stop. The concept of gradual de-escalation was foreign to human military thinking. When humans went to war, they went with overwhelming force, an absolute commitment. When they kept peace, they did so by making war too terrible to contemplate. As the Defiant approached the disputed system, Riley's crew made their final preparations. They checked weapon systems, reviewed combat protocols, and prepared for what they assumed would be a brief demonstration of human military superiority. None of them realized they were about to become legends in galactic history. The Council had asked for peacekeepers, and humanity was about to show them what peacekeeping meant when practiced by a species that had conquered their entire home system through constant warfare. The stage was set for first contact between galactic civilization and the most warlike species the galaxy had ever encountered. The Council's plea for help was about to be answered in ways they could never have imagined. Riley's final log entry before entering the system was characteristically brief, responding to peacekeeping request. Estimated time to resolution, minimal. Estimated casualties, theirs, not ours. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you asked humans to keep the peace. The spiral nebula shimmered with unnatural colors as weapons fire danced between opposing fleets. To human eyes, the battle looked like a carefully choreographed dance rather than actual combat. The Aquari vessels fired precise warning shots that deliberately missed their targets, while the Nethans responded with equally measured displays of force. Admiral Torres watched the engagement from her command ship, her forearms working frantically at control panels as she tried to maintain communication with both sides. Her species had evolved for diplomacy, their elongated skulls housing brains specialized for complex negotiation and conflict resolution. The current situation pushed her abilities to their limits. Aquari fleet, please maintain minimum safe distance, she transmitted, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked her as a natural mediator. Nethan forces, we are prepared to discuss territorial compensation for your mining investments. The responses came simultaneously, both sides speaking over each other in the polite but firm tones that had characterized this conflict from the beginning. Neither side wanted to appear aggressive, but neither would back down from what they considered legitimate claims. Torres noticed the new contact on her sensors before her communications officer announced it. Admiral, unknown vessel approaching from the outer system. They're broadcasting human identification codes. The term human meant nothing to Torres, but she felt a surge of hope. Any new perspective might break the deadlock that had frustrated her for weeks. Open a channel and invite them to dock. We need all the help we can get. The approaching vessel was unlike anything in Tara's experience. Where galactic ships were designed for beauty and efficiency, this newcomer was purely functional. Its hull bristled with weapon systems that seemed oversized for its frame, and its engine signature suggested tremendous power held in careful restraint. Riley's shuttle docked with Torres' command ship with mechanical precision. The human commander emerged wearing what Torres recognized as military equipment, though the designs were unfamiliar. His movements showed the controlled aggression of a predator, and his eyes held the steady focus of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions. Commander Riley, Terran Federation, he introduced himself, his voice carrying an edge that made Torres' diplomatic instincts tingle with warning. We received your distress call requesting peacekeeping assistance. Torres felt immediate relief. Thank you for responding, Commander. We have been attempting to mediate this dispute for 3 weeks. Both sides have legitimate claims and neither will compromise. We need a neutral party to establish a buffer zone while we work toward a negotiated settlement. Riley studied the tactical display showing both fleets' positions. His analysis was swift and thorough, identifying weapon capabilities, defensive positions and strategic vulnerabilities with the automatic precision of someone who had fought in real wars. What's their combat capability? He asked, surprising Torres with the directness of the question. Combat capability? Commander, these are mining vessels and civilian transports. They're not designed for warfare. The most aggressive action either side has taken is disabling a few cargo ships. Riley's expression didn't change, but something in his posture suggested disappointment. What are their current rules of engagement? Rules of engagement? I'm not sure I understand. They're following standard peaceful resolution protocols. No one wants to cause actual harm. Riley turned to study the display again, his tactical mind processing information that Torres couldn't interpret. So they're not trying to kill each other. Of course not. This is a territorial dispute, not a war. We need you to position your ship between them, establish a neutral presence, and provide security while we negotiate. Riley nodded slowly, though Torres sensed that his understanding of the situation differed significantly from her own. Understood. We'll establish a neutral presence and provide security. What Torres didn't realize was that Riley's definition of neutral presence involved positioning his heavily armed vessel where it could effectively engage both fleets simultaneously. Human peacekeeping doctrine was based on the principle of superior firepower, not patient mediation. As Riley returned to his ship, Torres felt cautiously optimistic. The humans seemed professional and well-equipped. Their willingness to help would surely provide the breakthrough her negotiations needed. The Defiant moved into position with the smooth efficiency of a warship designed for combat. Its weapon systems came online with the quiet hum of technology, far more advanced than anything the Aquari or Nethans possessed. Riley's crew took their positions with the practiced movements of veterans who had seen real battle. Both alien fleets watched the human vessel with curiosity rather than concern. Its aggressive positioning seemed oddly confrontational. But surely these new peacekeepers understood proper diplomatic protocol. Riley opened communication channels to both fleets simultaneously, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who had never issued an empty threat. This is Commander Riley of the Terran Federation. You have 30 seconds to cease hostilities and withdraw to minimum safe distance, or we will cease hostilities for you. The words hung in space like a challenge. Torres felt a cold shock of recognition that her understanding of human peacekeeping methods had been catastrophically wrong. The diplomatic situation was about to be resolved through methods that had never been tried in galactic history. Both fleet commanders responded with confusion and indignation, their polite protests revealing how little they understood about the nature of the forces they had accidentally summoned. They were about to receive their first lesson in human conflict. Resolution. Riley's finger hovered over the weapons control as he began his countdown. 20 seconds. The countdown echoed across 3 different communication channels, reaching every ship in both fleets simultaneously. Riley's voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone who had given this type of ultimatum before and had always followed. Through Brightwing, the Aquari fleet commander expanded his crystalline form to its full diplomatic posture, light patterns dancing across his surface in complex displays of authority and indignation. Unknown species, you have no jurisdiction in this matter. The Galactic Council has established proper procedures for 15 seconds. Riley interrupted, his voice cutting through the aliens' protest with mechanical precision. Drift Current, the Nethan commander, sent urgent queries through his fleets. Network, his gaseous form swirling with confusion and growing alarm. New beings, you do not understand the complexity of our situation. These territorial claims require careful consideration of historical precedent and 10 seconds. Admiral Torres watched in horror as her careful diplomatic framework collapsed around her. Commander Riley, please reconsider. Violence is not the solution here. We can negotiate a peaceful resolution that satisfies both parties. Riley's response was directed at the 2 fleets, not the mediator. 5 seconds. The Aquari and Nethans had never encountered a species that viewed negotiation as a luxury rather than a necessity. Their entire civilization was built on the principle that reasonable beings could always find peaceful solutions given enough time and patience. The concept of arbitrary deadlines enforced by overwhelming force was completely alien to their thinking. 0. The Defiance weapon systems activated with the smooth efficiency of technology designed for warfare against other humans. Riley had faced enemies with faster reflexes, better shields, and more advanced weaponry. The mining vessels and civilian transports arrayed before him presented no meaningful challenge. His first salvo was precisely calculated to demonstrate capability without causing casualties. The Aquari flagship's weapon systems vanished in a series of controlled explosions that left the rest of the ship intact. The Nethan command vessel's engines died as targeted energy. Bursts overloaded their power cores with surgical precision. Both fleets scrambled to respond, but their peacetime equipment was designed for mining operations and cargo transport, not combat. Their defensive systems had been built to protect against asteroids and cosmic radiation, not military-grade weapons fired by people who had spent their entire lives learning how to kill other people. Riley's tactical display showed the engagement was proceeding exactly as predicted. His weapons officer called out target confirmations with the calm professionalism of someone who had done this countless times before. Aquari fleet engines disabled. Nethan defensive systems offline. Both forces are dead in space, sir. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than 3 minutes. When the energy discharges faded, both fleets floated helplessly in space, their ships intact but completely powerless. Not a single life had been lost, but the message was unmistakable. Resistance was futile. Riley opened communication channels to both fleets again, his voice carrying the same flat certainty as before. Conflict resolved. Both parties will now withdraw to minimum safe distance and submit to mediation. Any attempts to resume hostilities will result in the complete destruction of your fleets. The silence that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. For the first time in 3 millennia, military force had been used to resolve a dispute between civilized species. The implications were staggering. Bright Wing's light patterns had shifted to displays of shock and submission. How did you disable our systems so quickly? Our shields were at maximum power. Riley's response was matter of fact. Your shields were designed to deflect space debris. Our weapons were designed to kill other humans. There was never any question about the outcome. Drift current's gaseous form had condensed into a tight spiral of confusion and fear. Your technology is incredible. What species are you? How did you develop such advanced weaponry? We call ourselves humans. We developed these weapons by spending most of our history trying to kill each other. It's very effective training. Admiral. Torres finally found her voice, though it carried undertones of shock that her translation systems couldn't quite process. Commander Riley, what you just did? It violates every principle of galactic civilization. Violence is not how we resolve disputes. Riley's smile was the expression of someone who had just solved a problem in the most efficient way possible. Admiral, the dispute is resolved. Both sides are now willing to negotiate. Isn't that what you wanted? The truth was undeniable. Both fleets were frantically signaling their willingness to accept any mediated settlement rather than face the humans again. The territorial dispute that had consumed weeks of careful negotiation was effectively over. Torres realized that she was witnessing the birth of a new era in galactic relations. The humans had introduced concepts that would fundamentally change how conflicts were resolved. The age of endless negotiation was ending, replaced by something far more direct and terrifying. Riley checked his tactical display one final time, noting that both fleets were maintaining safe distances and showing no signs of renewed aggression. Admiral Torres, we're ready for your next assignment. Are there any other disputes that need resolving? Torres stared at the human commander, understanding that her species' role as mediators had just become obsolete. The humans had solved in minutes what had taken her weeks to even attempt. The galaxy was about to learn What happened when peacekeeping was performed by a species that had mastered the art of war? The spiral nebula fell silent except for the hum of human weapons systems. Still powered and ready? The first lesson in human diplomacy was complete. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in unprecedented secrecy, with delegates arriving through private channels to avoid the growing media attention surrounding the human incident. The ancient chamber, designed for calm deliberation, buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from dozens of species struggled to process what had happened in the spiral nebula. Council Prime Keldon raised his ceremonial staff, its crystalline surface dimmed by the gravity of the situation. Fellow delegates, we face a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our civilization. The humans have introduced methods of conflict resolution that violate every principle we hold sacred. Admiral Torres stood at the center of the chamber, her forearms gesturing as she delivered her report. The humans disabled both fleets in under 3 minutes. They used targeted strikes that neutralized combat capability without causing casualties. Both sides immediately agreed to mediation rather than face them again. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembly. The peaceful accords had governed galactic civilization for 3,000 years, built on the principle that violence was never the solution to any problem. The humans had shattered that principle in a single engagement. But did they actually solve the dispute? Asked Representative Mostender of the Agricultural Consortium. Are the Aquari and Nethans satisfied with the resolution? Torres' expression showed reluctant admiration. They signed the mediation agreement within hours. The territorial dispute has been resolved with terms that both sides consider fair. The humans accomplished in 1 day what we had been unable to achieve in 3 weeks. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The humans had proven that violence, properly applied, could resolve conflicts more efficiently than negotiation. The philosophical foundations of galactic society were crumbling. Before the Council could reach any conclusions, their emergency session was interrupted by urgent communications from across the galaxy. 3 new conflicts had erupted, and in each case, local authorities were requesting human intervention. The first crisis involved the Mollusk Confederacy and the insectoid hives, ancient trading partners whose relationship had deteriorated into accusations of economic sabotage. Traditional mediation had failed, and both sides were threatening to sever commercial ties that supported billions of beings. Commander Riley received the request while his crew was conducting post-mission maintenance. The situation was presented as a delicate economic dispute requiring careful handling and cultural sensitivity. Riley's solution was characteristically direct. He positioned the Defiant between the 2 sides' primary trading stations and opened communications. This is Commander Riley. You have a choice. Resolve your differences through negotiation, or watch us demonstrate why trade wars are inferior to actual wars. To emphasize his point, he selected a small uninhabited moon in the neutral zone and reduced it to constituent atoms with a single salvo from his main batteries. The display of firepower was calculated to show capability without causing harm. But the message was unmistakable. Both sides agreed to immediate arbitration rather than discover what other demonstrations the humans might provide. The economic dispute was resolved within hours, with both parties eager to avoid any further human attention. The second conflict involved territorial boundaries between the avian flocks and the reptilian clans, species whose slow-moving dispute had consumed decades of careful negotiation. The humans were asked to provide security. During boundary surveys, Riley's Marines conducted their security operations with the efficiency of soldiers who had fought in real wars. Their patrol routes were designed to maximize visibility while demonstrating combat readiness. When both sides realized that the humans were treating the situation as an active combat zone, their willingness to compromise increased dramatically. The territorial dispute was resolved when both species agreed to accept arbitrated boundaries, rather than risk having the humans impose their own solutions. The Marines' presence had communicated that human patience was limited and their methods were absolute. The third crisis was the most serious, a resource conflict between the crystalline entities and the energy beings that threatened to destabilize an entire sector. Both sides possessed technology that could cause significant damage, and traditional peacekeeping methods had proven ineffective. Riley's approach was to position his growing fleet where it could monitor both sides simultaneously. When minor skirmishes broke out despite his warnings, he demonstrated the difference between galactic military technology and human weapon systems, the energy beings' defensive shields. Considered impenetrable by galactic standards, lasted approximately 15 seconds against human targeting systems. The crystalline entities' supposedly indestructible battle platforms were reduced to glittering debris with surgical precision. Both sides immediately requested ceasefire negotiations rather than face the possibility of total annihilation. The resource conflict was resolved through arbitration, with both parties accepting terms they had previously rejected. News of these successes spread through the galaxy faster than official communications could travel. The humans had established a perfect record. Every conflict they encountered was resolved quickly, efficiently, and permanently. The unintended consequence was that their reputation began to precede them. Species that had been locked in disputes for generations suddenly found common ground rather than risk human intervention. The mere possibility of facing the humans was changing the nature of galactic diplomacy. Riley found himself commanding a growing fleet as more human vessels arrived to meet the demand for their services. The Terran Federation had discovered that their military capabilities were perfectly suited for peacekeeping operations. Though their definition of peacekeeping differed significantly from galactic norms, the humans had introduced a new concept to galactic civilization: peace through strength. Their willingness to use overwhelming force to end conflicts was creating stability that centuries of negotiation had been unable to achieve. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the most effective way to keep the peace was to be really, really good at war. The memorial garden on Harmony Station had been designed as a place of reflection, where delegates could contemplate the peaceful nature of galactic civilization. Now it served as the meeting point for the most unusual diplomatic conference in recorded history, where former enemies gathered to discuss their shared fear of human intervention. Ambassador Brightwing of the Aquarii met with Commander Drift Current of the Nethans in the shadow of monuments dedicated to 3,000 years of peaceful conflict resolution. Their species had been bitter rivals for generations, but recent events had given them a common perspective that transcended their ancient grievances. "The humans have been gone for 2 weeks," Brightwing observed, his crystalline form flickering with nervous energy. "Yet our workers continue to operate the shared mining facilities without a single dispute." Drift Current's gaseous form swirled thoughtfully. "Fear is a powerful motivator. No one wants to be the reason the humans return to resolve another situation." Their conversation was typical of similar meetings happening across the galaxy. Species that had fought for centuries were discovering the benefits of cooperation. When the alternative was human peacekeeping, the threat of overwhelming force had accomplished what millennia of negotiation had failed to achieve. In the depths of space, the human fleet had grown from a single ship to a formidable force that patrolled the major shipping lanes and monitored potential conflict zones. Commander Riley now held the unofficial title of Galactic Peacekeeper. Though his methods remained as direct as ever, Lieutenant Hayes reviewed the latest intelligence reports from across their patrol sector. "Sir, we're getting requests for intervention from 6 different systems, but preliminary investigation suggests most of these can be resolved through reputation alone." Riley nodded, studying the tactical display that showed their current area of responsibility. "What kind of requests?" "Trade disputes mostly. Also some territorial disagreements and resource conflicts. Nothing that requires actual force deployment." The development pleased Riley more than he had expected. Human strategy had always favored psychological warfare, and the galaxy was proving remarkably susceptible to the mere threat of their intervention. "Send standard warning messages to all parties involved. Remind them that we're available if negotiation fails." The messages were simple and direct, carrying the now familiar human approach to diplomacy. "This is Commander Riley of the Terran Federation. We understand you have a dispute that requires resolution. We recommend immediate negotiation. Our previous methods remain available if needed. The response was immediate and universal. Every conflict Riley's fleet monitored was resolved within days of receiving his message. The galaxy had learned that human patience was limited and their solutions were permanent. Admiral Torres, now serving as official liaison between the Galactic Council and the human fleet, submitted her quarterly report on the peacekeeping experiment. The statistics were undeniable. Conflicts that had previously consumed months or years of mediation were being resolved in days or hours. The humans have fundamentally changed the nature of galactic diplomacy, she wrote. Their willingness to use force has created a stability we have never experienced. However, this stability is based on fear rather than mutual understanding. The Council wrestled with the philosophical implications of their new reality. The humans had proven that violence, properly applied, was more effective than any peaceful method they had developed. The revelation challenged everything they believed about civilized behavior, yet the results spoke for themselves. The galaxy was experiencing its most peaceful period in recorded history. Trade flowed freely along routes that had been disrupted by conflicts for centuries. Species that had been enemies for generations were working together on joint projects. The transformation was most evident in the former war zones. The Spiral Nebula, once the site of the first human intervention, had become a model of interspecies cooperation. The Aquari and Nethans had not only resolved their mining dispute, but had formed a joint venture that was proving remarkably profitable. Commander Riley's final report of the year summarized the human perspective on their peacekeeping role. We have established effective deterrence across 17 systems. Conflict resolution time has been reduced from an average of 6 months to less than a week. No human casualties have been sustained. Recommended action: maintain current patrol schedules and response protocols. The dry military language concealed the magnitude of what had been accomplished. A single human fleet had redefined galactic civilization, replacing centuries of careful negotiation with the simple threat of overwhelming force. The unintended consequence was that the humans had become prisoners of their own success. Their reputation for effective violence meant that every new conflict generated requests for their intervention. The galaxy had become dependent on the threat of human force to maintain order. Riley understood the irony of their situation. They had become peacekeepers by being exceptionally good at war. The galaxy's stability now depended on a species that viewed violence as a natural state of being. As another routine patrol began, Riley reflected on the transformation his fleet had brought to galactic civilization. The Council had asked for peacekeepers, and they had received exactly what they needed, just not in the way they had expected. The human definition of peacekeeping had become the galactic standard. Violence, properly controlled and strategically applied, had proven more effective than any peaceful method in the galaxy's history. The universe was a quieter place, and everyone knew why. When you asked humans to keep the peace, you got peace. You also got the understanding that peace was maintained by people who were really good at war. The new galactic order was built on a simple principle that the humans had introduced. Sometimes the best way to end the fight is to be the most dangerous thing in the room.